Tervetuloa munkin puolestani. Mä olen Raita NEDiltä ja ensimmäistä kertaa nyt ollaan sponsorina tässä SPUG.FI:ssa, vaikka esityksiä meiltä onkin jo näkynyt jonkun verran. Ja mukava nähdä näinkin runsas joukko ja toivottavasti lisää porukkaa tulee siihen. Kuitenkin rehellisesti katsottuna niin illan kohokohtaan eli se Microsoftin Yammer-esitykseen. Ja mä vedän hyvin lyhyen setin, ihan muutama minuutti vaan NEDistä, meidän palveluista, ja sitten annan puheenvuoron meidän MVP for SharePoint Andrey Markeeville, jolla sitten on vähän pitempi ja mielenkiintoisempi varmaankin esitys liittyen client-side renderingin ja muutahan meillä on hyvin mielenkiintoisia esityksiä kaiken kaikkiaan tänään ja erittäin ajankohtaisia sellaisia, että toivottavasti pysytte ihan loppuun asti ja sitten kahvia on siellä käytävällä ja varmaan nytkin pääsisi periaatteessa hakemaan, mutta odotetaan ainakin tämä ensimmäinen esitys loppuun ja mennään vaikka sen jälkeen ihan ottamaan kahvia ja teetä ja kakkua ja sitten sen jälkeen vielä tulee glögiä jossain vaiheessa, niin mennään eteenpäin. Joo, ihan lyhyesti meistä, niin aloitan tällä asiakasdialla, että tehdään niin loppuasiakkaille kuin partnereille, sanotaan järjestelmäintegraattoripartnereille projekteja alihankintana. Periaatteessa noin puolet menee tämän liikevaihtoon ja moni teistä varmaan tunteekin meidät eri projekteista nimenomaan silloin, kun me toimitetaan resursseja projekteihin, mutta toisaalta noin puolet tästä meidän tekemisestä menee ihan suoraan loppuasiakkaille ja tätä kautta sitten ollaan päästy keräämään hyvinkin laajasti projektikokemusta, koska luonnollisesti tämä tämmöinen projektialihankintatoiminta, jossa tehdään useammalle partnerille yhtä aikaa useammalle loppuasiakkaalle projekteja, niin se tuo sitä kokemusta jonkun verran enemmän kuin jos koko resurssimme olisi mennyt muutamalle loppuasiakkaalle vaan. Eli ei tästä sen enempää, vaan mennään suoraan niin siihen, mitä niin osataan. Ja nämä tehdään muun muassa julkisia SharePoint-pohjaisia sivustoja ja kohta tulee muun muassa erittäin mielenkiintoinen hanke tässä kun asiakas lanseeraa vuodenvaihteessa SharePoint 2013 pohjaisen julkisen sivuston julkisen sektorin asiakas oikeastaan, ja siinä on käytetty kaikkia niitä viimeisimpiä mausteita ja projekti on periaatteessa jo valmis ja asiakas vaan odottaa vuodenvaihdetta, että pääsee lanseeraamaan. Tehdään intranetteja luonnollisesti, kun ollaan SharePointin kanssa tekemisissä myöskin, ja mä oon tästä laittanut tuohon, että yhteisölliset ja asialliset. Joku asiakas on sanonut, että me ei haluta yhteisöllisyyttä tänne ollenkaan, tehdään asiallinen internet, ja mä otin siitä sitten vaan itselleni semmoisen termin, että kaikki, mitkä koskee projektia, siis sanotaan asiakirjahallintaa ja tällaista niin kuin asiallista puolta, niin okei, asiakkaan lanseeraama termi, mutta otin sen käyttööni. Ja jonkun verran ollaan oltu tekemisissä SharePoint Onlinein kanssa myöskin. No, aika paljonkin itse asiassa ja kerätty sieltä kokemusta, niin negatiivista kuin positiivistakin. Viestintä- ja markkinointipuolen ratkaisuja ollaan myöskin rakennettu SharePointin pohjalle niin osana asiakkaiden projekteja, esimerkiksi intra- tai julkisen puolen toteutuksia, kuin myöskin ihan erillisenä ratkaisuna myöskin. Näistä kohta mainitsin ainakin yhden tässä alempana. Niin erityisosaamista ollaan kerätty muun muassa datamigraatioista ja data-arkistoinnista, autentikoinnista. Ja tuossa migraatioiden puolella on tehty hyvinkin eksoottisia asioita, kuten Lotus Notesista migraatiota SharePointiin ja dokumentoimista Hummingbirdiista ja tällaisista ihan täysin ulkopuolisista järjestelmistä. Hyvin haastavia, mutta onnistuneita tavallaan, ja niihin on muun muassa kehitelty tämmöisiä erilliskomponentteja tyyliin migration engineitä ja archiving tooleja, eli kaikki nämä migraatiot ja arkistointiratkaisut ne perustuu määrättyihin niin moottoreihin, joita sitten räätälöidään käytännössä asiakkaan tarpeiden mukaisesti. Joo, näistä viestintä- ja markkinointiratkaisuista niin voisin mainita SharePoint-pohjaisen uutiskirjekomponentin, jota nyt muutamalla asiakkaalla ollaan jo toimitettu ihan sellaisena erillisprojektina, niin todella tehokas, mielenkiintoinen työkalu, että pystyy hyödyntämään jo valmiiksi SharePointissa tuotettua aineistoa, uutisjulkaisuja, tiedotteita, ihan periaatteessa julkaisusivuja ja koostamaan niistä hyvin nopeilla yksinkertaisilla toimenpiteillä määräaikaisia uutiskirjeitä ja luonnollisesti jakelee eteenpäin niin sisäisesti kuin ulkoisillekin käyttäjille. No, miksi meidän kanssa kannattaa tehdä yhteistyötä, niin meillä on runsaasti kokemusta olla yrityksenä tehty SharePoint-projekteja vuodesta 2007 ja sitten yksittäisillä konsulteilla on jo oikeastaan jollakin 10 vuoden kokemus SharePointista. Ja kun meidän kanssa lähtee tekemään projektia, niin luonnollisesti me sen itse toteutuksen lisäksi niin tarjotaan jonkun verran knowledge transferia ja niitä parhaita käytäntöjä, mitä SharePoint-kehitykseen liittyy, niin siinä asiakas myöskin hyötyy tavallaan näistä hyvinkin runsain mitoin. Ja tuosta erityisosaamisesta onkin jo maininnut ja ollaan luonnollisesti hyvin paljon jouduttu tekemään erilaisia optimointeja, räätälöintejä, erillissovelluksia, kustomointia ylipäänsä eri asiakkaille ja niistä sitten pystytty osaamistietokantaa kartuttamaan. Niin, ja väittäisin, että meillä on erittäin joustava toimintamalli, että kullekin asiakkaalle rakennetaan sitten hyvinkin pitkälle räätälöity paketti riippuen ihan asiakkaan tarpeista ja projektin tarpeista ja kustannuspaineista, kaikki mahdolliset tekijät huomioon ottaen. Siinäpä oikeastaan tämä lyhyt johdanto. Ehkä tämä kalvo sitten osittain myös todistaa niitä väitteitä, mitä on tässä heitellyt. Ja kysymys on nimenomaan Microsoftin Customer Satisfaction Surveystä, virallisesta sellaisesta, mikä kuuluu niin osana tätä kultatason sertifiointia. Niin täytyy sanoa, että aika ylpeitä ollaan noista luvuista. Että se pienenkin luku, mikä tässä on, niin toi 20%, niin se on ehkä kovin näistä kaikista, että asiakkaat kokee meille olevan jotain ylivoimasta kilpailuetua, mikä on kyllä hieno asia tiedostaa ja kuulla asiakkaalta. Ja toi 30% myös, niin jos 70% on erittäin tyytyväisiä ja vain 30% sitten siis vain tyytyväisiä, niin hieno homma sekin. Että kaiken kaikkiaan asiakastyytyväisyys on aika korkealla tasolla. Ainakin alkuvuodesta ollut, toivottavasti ei ole ainakaan huonompaan suuntaan tässä mennyt. Joo, tässäpä oli lyhyt esittely ja mä siirränkin puheenvuoron Andreille ja let's switch to English now. I'll give the floor to our SharePoint MVP, Andrey Markeev, who is going to present a very, I would say, topical presentation about client-side rendering. And I guess Andrey will actually tell himself why it's so topical. Yeah.
Okay, here. Just a moment. Okay. Hello everybody, my name is Andrey. I am senior SharePoint consultant at NED, and also I'm SharePoint MVP, and that basically means that I do a lot of stuff related to SharePoint at my spare time. Well, and I especially like working with client side, and today I'm gonna introduce you to the new feature of SharePoint 2013, which is client side rendering. So we will start with talking about how CSR works, what is happening under the hood. Then I will tell you how to create your own customizations in SharePoint, with CSR API. Well, the next thing will be deploying CSR within your Visual Studio solutions, and then the last section of my presentation will be devoted to practical experience. So what are the problems and how to work around them. But before that all, I want to tell you why. Why does that matter and why should you care? First of all, CSR now is the main rendering engine in SharePoint 2013. It is the default rendering engine. All the lists and search results are displayed through the CSR. CSR is the successor of XSLT, and there is interesting thing that although many people use XSLT now, and there are hundreds and hundreds of articles telling how to do this tricky thing in XSLT, but back in 2010 I remember that almost nobody was using XSLT, and I was always wondering what happens. There are so many benefits that XSLT can provide comparing to the older approaches, and now we have this almost the same situation with CSR. There are so many benefits that it could provide, but very few people use it now. And just briefly about the benefits. First, I want to say about the performance, maybe more like server load on your server. So just by choosing to make your customizations with CSR, you are reducing your server load. Here's how it happens. So imagine you have one server and then many clients, and for example you have some cool news for them, and you post this news to the portal, and then you also send messages by email, and then they come to work to the office in the morning and open their laptops, and they read your message and they click your link, and all these hundreds and hundreds of users, all of them almost at the same time goes to your portal, and it gets swept. So why it happens? Because even if one user only needs 1% of CPU, then hundreds of users will need hundreds % of CPU. And so what CSR can do, it is a client-side technology. Basically it brings this load back to the clients, because there are so many clients, and this is a benefit for any client-side technology, because there are so many client machines and they each have one CPU and maybe many CPUs and its own memory and so on. And what is 1% of CPU for the client machine? It's nothing. So basically CSR is really beneficial in terms of that it is just a client-side technology. Then debugging. For example, if I would compare CSR with XSLT, then I would say about debugging. You just can debug XSLT, and then there is no such problem with CSR. And what basically it means that it makes developers more productive, because they can find the bugs more easily. Then readability. It is very hard to maintain something that looks like like mess. Please come in, guys. So readability is directly related to maintenance, and XSLT was really bad in these terms. So readability is also benefit for CSR. And then JavaScript. It is JavaScript based, and it is in itself very beneficial for both business and developers. Why? Because you know, JavaScript is the cutting edge of technology. There are so many things happening in JavaScript. There are new frameworks, there are new libraries, new approaches, new everything, and well, basically almost all the news related to IT, they somehow relate to JavaScript as well nowadays. And this makes us this makes developers more motivated, and then it makes us also more productive. Okay, but I think that's enough, and I think that CSR is really much better than XSLT. This is my personal opinion, but I think that there are really so many benefits that you just need to, it is worth learning. Okay, let's actually move to the beef and see how CSR works, what happens inside. And here a little disclaimer. So I will be telling only about lists today, leaving out search, because I haven't been working with search customizations much. Well, but still I think that will be quite illustrative, even only with lists. So in case of lists, what happens there is that there are two web parts, two old good web parts that we all know, XSLT list view web part and then list form web part. They are doing server-side part of CSR processing. So these web parts just got another rendering mode, which is client render, and being switched to this mode, and they are by default in this mode in 2013. They will produce some JSON context object. Basically what that means is that instead of generating HTML themselves, instead of using all these XSLT transformations and all this stuff, they will just grab all the information, they will collect all the possibly necessary information for rendering, and then put it to the page as a big JSON context object. So there are no there are two properties mentioned here that happen to be in this context, but actually there are, well, a lot more than two, of course, but these two just stand out, their main properties. So list data is basically all the data that is supposed to be shown in this view on this page, and then list schema is all the settings, you know, list settings, view settings, and field settings that should be used for rendering, because the data is in raw format and you need to format it. Okay, and after this context is put on the page, what these web parts will also do is they will render some call to some method that will start CSR processing. And central method of the CSR processing is sp_client_renderer.render. This method goes through three main stages: pre-render, render, and post-render. Well, render is a composite method, composite stage, and during this stage, render view method is called, which in turn calls render header, render body, render footer, and then render body is also a composite, and it will call render group for each group if the list is grouped, and then this render group will render some grouping really related stuff like expand collapse button and title of the group and so on. And then it will call also for every item that should be under this group, it will call render item. And then render item will call render field for each field. Okay, pretty simple, yes? I mean, okay, well, this is a primitive diagram, but it took me hours to collect this diagram together, to just put things together, because, you know, there is nothing. Documentation is really scarce. Okay, but yeah, I had to go to the source code and debug and go through all these files and just see what happens, because it's really not obvious what happens, what is run before and what is after, and what is render header. Is it a header of the item or the group or of all of them, or what? So okay, so this is an important diagram for understanding how CSR works, and we will return to it during this presentation, not once. But another important thing, tricky detail, I would say, that I want to tell here is that all these methods render something, they produce HTML string as a result value. Now this HTML string, and this is the tricky detail, it is not inserted to DOM right away. It is not inserted to the DOM model of the page. It keeps aggregating and aggregating, and only after the render step is finished, it will be inserted then to the DOM. So only after this render view is completed. And basically that means that if you rendered something in render header, you cannot access it yet in render footer, because it's not in the DOM. You can only do it from on pre-render method. Okay, just a little tricky detail. But this is how CSR works, and I think this is enough, and this is most important information. And you will see that it really helps to understand and to create your own customizations. So let's move on and actually do that. I mean, learn how to use CSR API. So returning to this diagram, I want to say first of all that each of these rectangles, each of these render something methods can be customized. All right, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So I have an Office 365 site right here. Okay, and I have a documents library here. Just an ordinary documents library. Don't ask me why Jimmy Wales is there. Maybe I just like Wikipedia. But okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this page and just insert a content editor web part and insert some JavaScript there. Don't do that. This is just demonstration. Okay, so I'm adding a web part, meta and content editor, and it goes here right before the documents library, and I'm going to edit it. And then I'm going to add the content and go to edit source, and here we are. Let me magnify a bit, and here I will write script type text JavaScript and script. Oops. All right, and here we will be using SP client templates namespace, which is the main namespace basically for the CSR customizations API. Okay, and there is a template manager object, and there is register template overrides method here, and then this method accepts some options object as its parameters, Sorry. I'm not going to explain it right now because we will be getting to it just in a couple of moments. But I will just put something here. So we're going to customize footer and we are going to write hello user group here. And now we're going to save this page and see what happens here. Wow, and that is that simple. Can you imagine? This is just a couple of lines of JavaScript and it works. This is how you can easily start using CSR. You cannot just like that start using XSLT, for example. Okay, but of course it is just a hello world example, and let's continue because there are many other details. So let's take a look at this sort of template of creating your customizations with CSR. Please don't forget to ensure that that the client templates.js file is loaded. This is basically the main file with CSR API. I'm not doing that because I'm a bad guy. I mean, this is just a demonstration, but and I'm sure that it is already loaded, but please do it every time. And then we're going to use register template overrides, very big title for a method name, but still, well, is quite easy to remember. And let's take a look at this options object. So this options object contains three main properties: on-per-render, templates, and on-post-render. And templates in turn contains some other properties like body, footer, header, item, and so on. So it's obviously return us to this diagram, and it is easily mapped to this diagram, right? So just once again, so we have options object, on-per-render, templates, on-post-render, and then templates contains view, body, header, and so on. And then on-per-render and on-post-render, they can be functions or arrays of functions. So they can be there can be many functions there. So you can set value of this property to array of functions. And all of these functions will be called during the pre-render or post-render stage. But what about templates? It would be funny to have two bodies or something. So you should have just only one function or a string, as we did in the hello world example. But here, interesting question: what happens if some other guy .js happen to be deployed to this very page and call this rendering, this register template overrides method as well? So what happens in case of on-per-render or on-post-render? It is pretty simple. They will just be going to these arrays, and they will be also called during the corresponding stages, and it will not break anything. But in case, for example, this badguy.js registers template override for footer as we did, so what happens then? It destroys our footer. Okay, so one nation can capture and hold only one city can be held by one nature, right? And this is the same here. So we can only have one template override. It is an override, one acting override. So this is a problem, right? So hey, what if we have two views and we want to put a footer only to one of them? So how to do that? Or maybe some other guy goes here and deploys his own customizations and they override our customizations, and then our solution doesn't work, and customer says, hey, your solution does work. But okay, it turns out that this options object has another three properties that I hid before. Okay, and they are view style, listing play type, and base view ID. Basically, these properties help you guys to specify which exactly view or list you are going to customize. Pretty simple. Listing play type is basically the listing plate ID. For example, for document libraries, it would be 101. And base view ID and view style you also can use. If you don't know what are these, then I can tell you after this session, or you can use Google. But let's return to the handlers. What then happens? Then we register a template override, so we pushed our handler to be there instead of some out-of-the-box code, obviously. And how this handler is supposed to behave? It turns out that this handler should accept as the first parameter the same JSON context object that we already saw was rendered by the server-side web parts. And then based on this context object, it should produce some HTML string. Very simple. But what happens if we put a string there? It turns out, again, you have to go to the source code and to find out it. But okay, it turns out that this string will be passed to the parse template string method, and this method will parse out some tokens from the string and then use the context as well for creating some HTML string by replacing these tokens with actual values from the context. Let me show you how it works. Returning to our hockey page, let's just edit this content editor web part, and let's put some token here. What will happen then? So, for example, we will use something like this. So we will use cityx.listTitle, and notice how the tokens are decorated. Pretty similar to what we have in ISPX pages, right? But we are using sharp instead of %. But okay, I think that's it. Let's see how. Maybe it doesn't. But no, it works. Wow. So, hello, user group from documents. And documents is the title of this document library. Okay, but what if we want to use function instead of this string? How should we proceed with that task? Okay, I'm editing it once again, and now my footer is not a string, but it is a function, and it accepts context as its parameter. And then we are returning this string, and this is the bracket. But here we cannot use tokens anymore. Well, we can, but we should explicitly call this parse template string method. But there are better ways, of course. For example, we can do like this. Oops. Like this, right? But I think that I want to introduce to another function that you probably don't know, and which is extremely useful. This is basically string format, the same as in C#, and it comes from ASP.NET Ajax library. Okay, and it should be like, okay, so No. This is missing. Alright, so this syntax is very handy if you want to create like HTML and put it into strings. Okay, so just remember that you can use string.format, because ASP.NET Ajax library is loaded to each SharePoint page starting from SharePoint 2010, and you can use it. You don't need to deploy anything there, any additional stuff. You should deploy, for example, jQuery, but you can use this one without deploying. Okay, and then if we save, then we will get the same stuff, but using function. But hey, this was really boring, right? I mean, the example. Let's try to do something really bigger. What if I want, for example, I want to have color coding here. Just this library, it has approval status, and I want to, for example, to make the line that is approved with to be with the green background. So let's do it. Okay, this requires a bit more code, but not that much, and I'm even risking to do it right now during the demo. Waiting. Okay, and now we can add it, and we need, instead of footer, okay, just instead of footer we will be using on post render. Then we no longer need these templates, and then we don't want to return anything, because on post render is just a function that is called like during this stage, and it shouldn't return anything. But then first of all, I want to extract rows of this list from the context. So remember list data, which was one of the main properties there, and it has surprisingly array named row, not rows. But this is rows. Okay, and for var I equals 0 and less than rows.length I ++, and here we will check if the item is approved. So var is approved equal to let's say it will be rows I, and then there is moderation status column, right? Status column, and it should be equal to approved. Oops, where is it? It's here. Okay, so is approved equal to approved. Okay, makes sense. And if is approved, we are going to change the background color of this row to green color. But you can't get actually stuff that was rendered to the page from this context. You have to go to the page and somehow grab it from there, and we will do it. It's not really that hard to do. So for this we will also use this get is the shortcut for document.getElementById. This also comes from ASP.NET Ajax library. And then we will use tricky SharePoint method generate IID for list item. And this is completely magic, so I will not go into tell you how it works, but it just accepts the context and our row, and then here we will style it with background color equal to let's say ADA. This is green, but this is also the first programming language, by the way, ADA. Okay, but I think that's it. This is color coding with CSR. Not that, but let's see if it works. Wow, really? Oh, not. Okay, so it's green. All right, and what will happen if, for example, I want to approve this one? So it's now approved. It should become green. Wow, it's green. I'm just kidding, guys. All right, but I think that is really great. CSR is quite concise if you know how to use it, of course, because there was, remember, one magic method: generate IID for list item. Okay, but let's move on and let's now talk a bit about deploying, about how you deploy these CSR customizations to your solutions. I propose you not to use my method. I mean, with content editor web part, it is really not that handy. All right, but there is a GSLink property that was added in SharePoint 2013, especially for this purpose, for deploying CSR customizations. But you saw that CSR is really just a normal script, just a JavaScript. There is nothing special there. So actually, this means basically that we can use GSLink for deploying not only CSR scripts, but normal scripts as well. And this is cool. And by the way, CSR can be deployed by using any method you want to the page. You can put it to the master page. You can put it to the page markup. You can put it to some web art, no problem. You can use whatever method you want, whatever method you prefer. There are a number of them in SharePoint. But let's return to GSLink. So GSLink, what it allows you to do is to attach some script to some object. So there are 6 objects here mentioned, and for example, you can attach a script to some content type, and then wherever this content type appears, this script will be also deployed automatically to the page. You don't need to do anything. This is very cool. And even better, consider this string. You can deploy not one script, but many of them. If your script, for example, uses jQuery, you can put jQuery and then vertical line and then your script, and it will be deployed as well. So this is cool. So basically we have many scripts for every object. And even better, duplicates are removed. Can you imagine? I mean, really, Microsoft did great stuff, really. Okay, so what happens that duplicates are tracked by the file path. So it will not analyze the contents, unfortunately. But if you have like scripts that have the same path, then they will not be deployed twice. Okay, so I think that GSLink is definitely something what you want to use in your solutions, even if you don't use CSR at all, just for deploying some scripts to the page. Please come in, guys, no problem. And you can use GSLink either from server-side object model or client-side object model or CAML, whatever, so they are fully compatible with apps, and you know, no problems with that. Okay, but now we finally reached no, that is only the beginning. I mean, we just reached the problems section. So unfortunately, CSR is not perfect. All right, but the main problem I think with CSR is complicated contexts. So remember we have list forms and list views, and contexts have many properties, and these properties will be very different in these two types of kind of objects. So for list view it will be one context, for list form it will be quite another context, and then even worse. I told you even better, now even worse. Okay, so list view now got a new mode, edit mode, and then context there will be different. And then list form, it had all the time three modes: new, edit, and display. And these are 5 different types of context, and there are, for example, in one context there are 90 properties, and some of them are composite, right? And all this data is going to be different. So this is something to learn, or maybe, I don't know. But okay, and complicated context and the thing that goes hand in hand with complicated context is the lack of documentation. Well, just replace it. And then, of course, JavaScript, if you are using the CSR customizations intensively, then JavaScript is also sort of a problem, because it is not supposed to be used to make some big things, right? It's just a scripting engine language. So JavaScript is something that you also need to be aware that there could be some problems with that. It's hard to write some big solutions with it. But I want to share how I solve these problems for myself. It's more, maybe it is not the way that you would prefer yourself, but just in case. So I'm using TypeScript. So TypeScript is really interesting thing. I will not talk much about it, but just very briefly. So TypeScript is a language that compiles to JavaScript. There is a plugin in Visual Studio, so you save a TypeScript file, then automatically JavaScript file is generated. And TypeScript is developed by Microsoft, and it is an open source project, and it is developed in JavaScript. So TypeScript is written in JavaScript. Wow. I mean, okay. And then TypeScript is a strongly typed language with great intelligence, just like in C#, and it has means for creating your object-oriented programming things like like interfaces and method overrides and classes and whatever, you know. So I think that this is something what you might want to try. And there is one more interesting thing about TypeScript. There is an open source project called TypeScript Definitions for SharePoint 2013. I'm one of the authors of this project, but I'm not like advertising it for you guys, because actually I wrote it more for myself, because I've been working with client-side stuff so much, so a lot of time. I've been putting so much efforts there, and it was very, you know, very inconvenient at times. And then I created with my fellow Stas Vyshipan, from his MVP from Russia, and we created this project. We put really a lot of efforts there, because these are definitions. You have to create these definitions, and they should cover all the SharePoint stuff, and they should include types, and it is very hard thing to build. But anyway, now they are built, and now you can use them, and there is client-side rendering part in these definitions. So that means that you can have IntelliSense for contexts, for example, and then for each property you will have like tooltip, and then you have the type of this property, which you of course cannot have in JavaScript, whatever in good IntelliSense it might have. So I think that it worth trying. And another thing is that we have examples there also in this project. So you can go, even if you don't want to use TypeScript, no problem. I mean, you can go there and go to sptypescript.codeplace.com and then to source tab, and you will see a lot of examples, and there are JavaScript files as well. And TypeScript generates very readable JavaScript code. Sorry, just evening. All right, so you can explore these examples, and that could be a good starting point for creating some customizations. And let me just briefly make a conclusion. Today we saw how CSR works, how to use CSR API for creating your own customizations, and I even showed you some hacky development in like text box. And then we saw what is the JS link property and how it can benefit you. And then we saw, well, not examples, actually tips and tricks, but also where you can get examples. Okay, and that's, I think, all for today, but please remember to follow me on Twitter. Yeah, that's all. Now that's all. Thanks.